In June 2016, at an E3 conference, Sony revealed the first trailer for Insomniacs' PS4 exclusive Spider-Man game, and I was hyped immediately. The graphics looked incredible, and the brief glimpses of swinging through the city and the combat they showed looked so cool. When the game was finally released in 2018, I was hooked as soon as I loaded it up, and devoured the game over that summer. It had a few issues, but I could look past those and I think fondly back on my time with it. Then, in 2020, the PS5 launch title Spider-Man Miles Morales came out, and in my opinion was an improvement on almost everything about the original. So when Marvel's Spider-Man 2 was announced in 2021, I was so excited. I couldn't wait to see how much more of an improvement from the last two games this one would be. I have fought crime, webbed up bad guys, and swung my way through New York for 29 hours in my attempt to earn the Platinum Trophy for Spider-Man 2, and here is my review. It's hard to talk about first-party AAA titles like Spider-Man on PS5 without praising the graphics they boast, and Spider-Man 2 is no exception to this. The city of New York looks incredible as you swing at breakneck speeds through its streets and over its skyscrapers, and I found the light and shadows around the city incredibly well done. The character models were good, especially Miles and Peter in their suits, but many of the face models on the characters did have moments of looking a little bit uncanny. I played the game on performance mode, as I do most games with the option, and had very minimal frame drops or stutters, even when combat was at its most hectic, which really made the game feel smooth and immersive when you were wailing on bad guys. This isn't to say that performance was perfect, however. The camera could be a bit finicky sometimes in combat, especially when doing finishes, and it would zoom in to show the cool beatdown animation, but it would sometimes get stuck on something or zoom in too close to see what was actually happening. I also encountered a few bugs throughout my playthrough, enemies getting stuck in places they shouldn't be, or crime icons being at places where absolutely nothing was happening, but these were manageable. I also suffered from a couple of weird freezes where a cutscene was supposed to start or a conversation was supposed to happen when you sat down on like a bench or something, but the characters would just sit there in silence. A quick reload sorted this out every single time, but by the third instance of this happening, it was pretty disappointing. The most annoying bug, however, that I had an issue with was with the subtitles of the game. A lot of the time they would not be synced up with the audio, and the subtitles would be a couple of lines behind what was being said, or other times, more annoyingly, they would be ahead of what was being said. I'm not really sure what caused this, but they would generally fix themselves once the cutscene had ended. Even with these issues though, it didn't put that much of a damper on my enjoyment with the game, as there was still so much fun to be had when you were just swinging around the city, and oh boy, is there a lot more city to be explored this time around. New York is nearly twice as big as it was in the previous titles, and full of things for a pair of Spider-Men to be distracted by. The simple act of swinging around the city feels just as fun as it did in the previous games, and I loved the addition of the web wings that let you glide around to help you get around faster. Once you learn the position of the wind tunnels that you can glide through, it makes getting around the city so fast that I very rarely used the fast travel option once I unlocked it. There are now 14 districts in the city, and each of them has their fair share of collectibles or side missions that you can do similar to the previous two games. Some of these are locked to each character, which I liked as it felt that there was always a good reason to switch between Peter and Miles. Most of these collectibles were just quick easy things, like grabbing spider bots that are dotted around the map or taking photos of different New York locations or people, but some were more involved. The quality of these side activities varied greatly though. There were some really cool friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man quests that range from a short 15-minute quest to help a blind woman find a new guide dog or find someone's missing grandfather, to some extensive ones that led to genuinely cool side stories, such as investigating a cult known as the Flame. There are also combat challenges you can do as Miles for a questline involving one of my favourite Spider-Man characters. Enemy bases return from previous games where you can fight or stealth your way through depending on your preference, and then there are side missions where you just need to beat up small groups of enemies or defend a point from being attacked. Then there are the side events that I found a bit boring or repetitive, such as following a robot bird through a wind tunnel for 2 minutes to download data from it, or almost all of the science missions you have to do as Peter. I think I appreciated that these science missions were at least trying to do something a bit different, but I felt like the puzzles should have either been harder or at least more varied to make them more interesting. This, however, could have been an issue with the way that I approached the game, as I did leave most of the side content to the post-game. By the end of my playthrough, I was kind of exhausted by the sense of repetition and busy work some of these missions consisted of. As you can see, there's a lot to do in Spider-Man 2, and that is before you even touch the main story content there is. In my opinion though, this is the best part of the game, and I tore my way through it, always eager to see the next story beat or the next boss fight. The story itself is one that has been told in comics and movies before, and I won't try to spoil anything that hasn't been shown in trailers, but the way that Insomniac told the story was fresh and interesting enough that even though I could see the broad strokes coming, the moment-to-moment story beats were really well told. The narrative is essentially split into two parts, beginning with Kraven the Hunter. Kraven is a man on a mission to hunt more and more dangerous creatures, including both Spider-Man and many of their roster of villains, and this leads him and his insanely large army of lesser hunters to enter the jungle of New York to finish their hunt. The other part of the story that happens simultaneously to this is one of the more popular Spider-Man stories, that of the symbiote. Peter at some point in the story connects with an alien life form that gives him even more power, but eventually starts to corrupt him as it takes over his mind. And this threat of being hunted, combined with the fallout of Peter changing, is at the heart of the conflict and narrative, and it plays out really well in my opinion. Much of the success and freshness of this retelling of Spider-Man's symbiote adventure is due to how the story uses Miles. At this point in the story, he is still being mentored by Peter, but he is more confident in himself and in his abilities as a hero. Seeing the way Peter's behaviour changes and how it affects his perception of those around him is really interesting to see from the viewpoint of the people he is hurting as well, and it really drives home the struggles that both Peter and Miles are facing throughout the game's story. I really enjoyed how well the story balances the two characters, and it never felt like one of them was outshining the other for screen time or development. I felt like the game also used other characters like MJ really well, and all of the game's villains were well written and threatening, always driving the story forward. I liked Kraven a lot as a villain, and his pure bloodlust felt very different from some of the other villains we have seen previously, and I can't wait to see what rogues appear in the next game and how Insomniac will tell their stories. The best story beats are always punctuated with a good boss fight, and Spider-Man 2 does this really well. The boss fights always felt like spectacles, thrilling, enjoyable affairs that were quite challenging to beat, with many of the bosses taking me a few tries to get past, which was definitely a step up from the previous title's difficulty. Each of the game's major boss fights felt unique and exciting, and most of them required more mechanically than just dodging the enemy and counter-attacking, with many of them requiring using different environmental interactions. One thing I really enjoyed was the breaks the fight had in them as you depleted the boss's health. Each boss has a number of health bars which you can see at the bottom of their bar, and when you deplete one there is a small scene between each phase. These phases act as checkpoints as well, but they also act as points to introduce new mechanics or moves to the boss's arsenal, and it was really cool to see how some of these bosses progressed. The combat itself is so good, even if it doesn't feel hugely different from the last two games. You build focus by hitting enemies, and you can use this focus to either heal or do flashy finishes on your enemies. Your basic melee attacks for both characters are incredibly smooth, flashy and acrobatic, and it is never not fun to launch an enemy into the air, smack them a few times, dodge a rocket that you can catch and throw back at the person who fired it, before going back to hitting the same guy that you left in the air. On top of your basic attacks, you also have special abilities that you can use by pressing L1 and a face button, and gadget attacks which are mapped to R1 and a face button. You unlock new abilities as you progress, but you can only equip 4, and Peter and Miles have very different abilities from each other, which helps them feel unique. You have 4 gadgets, which is a lower number than previous games, and these are shared between the characters, so this felt a little underwhelming. But both gadgets and abilities recharge over time, and combat is a dance of managing these abilities. There is also a parry mechanic that has been added, where you hit L1 just before a move hits you, and it opens up the enemy for a few hits. And certain attacks have to be parried, while others have to be dodged. These last two mechanics are a lot more prevalent in boss fights than regular fights, but they still need to be remembered. It is good that combat is so much fun, as there is a lot of it in the game. Almost every story beat and side quest is full of combat, so you'll be doing a lot of it. It's a shame then that the other side of the coin, the stealth sections of the game, feel so basic in comparison. There are certain parts of the game where stealth is an option, and this is something that I don't feel has been improved since the first game. You can web up enemies from high vantage points to take them out, or do noisier combat takedowns if you don't want to be sneaky. Sometimes there are shelves or something that you can pull down on an unsuspecting goon to knock them out, but honestly that's about as complex as it gets, especially with Miles, who can briefly turn invisible and lose the enemy's attention. It's disappointing, as it feels like, especially with fewer gadgets to choose from, there aren't that many options to make stealth fun, and the enemies are pretty unintelligent when it comes to being aware of you, and that there was no real challenge in the stealth sections. It was clear in the PS4 release how much the Batman Arkham series had inspired the game, especially with its use of stealth takedowns, but even that series' first game, Arkham Asylum, felt like it had better stealth mechanics than the modern game now. Also, returning from the previous games are the Spider-Bot and Mary Jane stealth sections. These feel like they have been improved, especially the MJ ones, and they felt a lot more interesting than the previous games, but it was still not enough to elevate the gameplay to something great. So lastly, let's talk about how you earn your Platinum Trophy. There will be some minor spoilers ahead just to let you know. The game itself isn't very long, even with the amount of side content that there is, and none of it is particularly difficult or missable. There are 9 unmissable story trophies, and 7 trophies that are connected to side quests. Most of these side quests have different steps that will unlock over the course of the story, so you can either do them as you find them, or wait till the post-game and do them all at once like I did. Then there are the rest of the collectibles. You need to get 100% completion of the map to get the Superior Trophy, so you'll have to complete all of the following. Every photo op, every Spider-Bot, every Hunter base, every Mysterium challenge, every bird drone, all of the symbiote nests, all the EMF puzzles, all the Prowler stashes, all the Sandman crystals, and all the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man quests. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of things to do in this game. There are also some combat trophies that it's worth keeping an eye on. They are not missable as such, but it is easier to do them before you have finished all the other collectibles, so you're not relying on random street crimes. You need to take out 25 enemies from a web line, which is an ability you unlock fairly early on. These are essentially stealth takedowns that I imagine would be quite hard to do once you have cleared all the hunter bases. You also have to use Miles' reverse flux move to pull more than 6 enemies to you at once. This is pretty easy to get in any of the symbiote nests if you miss it in the area that you unlock the ability. You also have to defeat 100 enemies with both Peter and Miles' abilities. This shouldn't be too difficult as long as you remember to use the abilities a lot. It does need to be the final blow though, so make sure you weaken the enemies before you use the ability. Lastly, you will need to use symbiote abilities 25 times while using Symbiote Surge, which is a rage mechanic that you can use by pushing in L3 and R3 when your surge bar is full. Again, not a difficult trophy, just remember to spam your abilities when you have used the surge. Next, there are trophies related to upgrades and unlocks, and you will need to earn different currencies for these, which you can earn by doing side missions or collectibles or through the main story itself. There are also stashes of tech parts, which is a currency you will need a lot of, dotted around the map, and one of the traversal suit upgrades will let you see these in your minimap when you're near them. You need to upgrade each of your 4 gadgets fully, reach the max level of 60, unlock all of the suit tech upgrades, which are things like more health or damage, and unlock every suit for Peter or Miles. You will have more than enough currency from doing the story and all the side quests that these shouldn't be difficult at all to unlock. One thing to note though, is that many of the suits have different styles which you can unlock by spending tech parts. You don't need all of these for the trophy, but you do need to unlock and equip one. If you do unlock too many of them though, you may need to go hunting for extra tech parts to afford all the upgrades you need. As I did. What can I say? I love colour variants. Lastly, there are some miscellaneous exploration trophies. You need to visit Aunt May's grave in the northwest of Harlem as Peter, and as Miles, you'll need to find his and Finn's Science Award, which is on the top of a church in the southern part of the financial district. While swinging around the city, try and perform 30 air tricks in a row without touching the ground. It doesn't matter if you use your web to swing again, just don't touch the ground. Also, fail a trick and hit the ground while trying to get one to earn the Splat trophy. You need to earn 10,000 tech parts for the Resourceful trophy, but you need more than that, I think, to unlock everything anyway, so this shouldn't cause you any trouble. Next, you can head to Coney Island and find the baseball field there, run around all 4 bases for the Home Run trophy, and lastly, you need to earn the Saw trophy by travelling from the financial district to Astoria only using your web wings. There are 2 tunnels that you can use that will get you there in no time at all. From the northeast corner of the financial district, glide and head east to the wind tunnel there, travel through it to the river, then head east a little bit more to hit a second one that will take you to Astoria. If you have trouble, remember you can press R3 to scan the area and it will show you nearby wind tunnels. Overall, like the previous titles, this is an incredibly easy Platinum trophy to earn. Even if some of the activities can feel a little repetitive, the journey is still a good one. The story is great, and the combat is engaging and exciting as long as you're not in the stealth modes. I just hope that in the inevitable third game, they do a lot more to mix things up with the side content and improve on these stealth sections. If you liked the last 2 games, I think you will love this one too, and overall, Marvel Spider-Man 2 is a big improvement over them, and I can't wait to see what Insomniac does with this franchise next.